Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Michael Norris. Mike Norris represents the 144th Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes the counties of Erie, Niagara, and Orleans. And we want to thank you folks all across Western New York for tuning in for our program today. Mike Norris, happy 2018 to you.
Happy 2018 to you too, Mike, and thank you for having me today.
This is our first chance to sit down and chat this 2018 legislative session. And it's like many legislative sessions, everything seems to have hit the ground running. You've already heard a State of the State message from this governor. You've already received his budget proposal for this year, so the budget hearings are underway. I mean, it's bam, we're right at it this year.
We're moving very, very quickly, and I just want to say, I've been in office now for just over a year, and it has been a tremendous experience of serving the people of Western New York in Erie, Niagara, and Orleans counties. And I like this opportunity, Mike, to be on the show to explain to my constituents back home what's going on here in Albany. I'm a member of several committees, including the Health Committee. We've already been meeting on the Health Committee on various issues that are affecting us. Also, the state budget was unveiled, proposed state budget by Governor Cuomo, $168.2 billion. I remember years ago as an assistant to Assemblyman David Seaman in the late 90s, the budget then was $55 billion, so it's gone up over $100 billion. In New York State, we have to do something about state spending. It is just completely out of control. Most folks don't know that we spend $72 billion on Medicaid services. And that's something that we need to examine and make sure we look at program by program to make sure that the results are actually being obtained, and looking at some of the items in terms of even the eligibility of those. One, for an example, not that's under Medicaid, but the governor's proposed in his budget the DREAM Act, and that would permit illegal immigrants from having an opportunity for free college tuition. I'm staunchly opposed to that. I don't believe that should be in our budget or should be as part of the state of New York.
Now, everybody knows how expensive college tuition is, especially those folks at home who are putting their kids through college right now, or maybe you're putting yourself through college right now. You know how expensive it is. So the price tag that would go along with a program like that, staggering. Yet at the same time, this governor is talking about how tough times were for New York State, how we were facing this multi-billion-dollar deficit. Every other word he seemed to be railing against what's going on in Washington, D.C., and yet you didn't hear too much about cutting back in state spending, just what you were talking about. Instead, there were all these new initiatives like the Dreamers and giving them free college education. There seems to be a disconnect there of some sort to me. Is there to you?
There certainly is. I mean, you think about this. There's $64 billion debt. That is $3,000 per New Yorker right now in the debt. The deficit is projected to be at $4.4 billion. And I didn't see any cuts in the state budget. I only saw more additions, more what he calls revenue enhancers. Those are taxes. He wants to place a tax on all internet sales. Now, certain sales are taxed, depending if the business is centered in New York. All internet sales would be taxed in the city of New York. It's constantly, he wants to pull back any business credits. We're trying to invest in the city of New York. We're trying to make it economically better. I haven't heard anything about cutting. Property taxes are the highest, one of the highest across the state. Our business climate is struggling. We need to reduce taxes, and that is by reducing spending.
I used the word disconnect a couple minutes ago. The news out of Washington with the president's tax cuts and such that he's trying to roll out seemed to be very popular. Everybody seems to be on board. The business community especially is saying, cutting back the regulations, cutting back on the taxes, the corporate taxes, the personal taxes. It's got everybody excited. Seems to be just the other message that's coming out of this governor's mouth as he goes through his State of the State address.
Yeah, if we're serious about doing business in the state of New York, we have to repeal some of the regulations are. Now, for example, the local newspaper asked me last week, what is my position on the scaffold law, for example? That has been on the books for a long, long time, since the 1800s. That needs to be revisited. The cost of insurance is up, the cost of construction is up, and it is hurting us. So it's not just taxes, it's the regulations. And if we're serious about doing business in New York, we need to examine this. We need to become more fiscally responsible, and we also make sure we need to provide a business climate by reducing and repealing unnecessary burden and taxes.
Well, as I said earlier, this budget process is just getting underway here at the state capitol. The budget hearings, the legislative budget hearings are being held where the governor's department heads are coming in and defending his budget proposal, and it's getting the serious discussion going. So maybe in our next program, we'll talk some more about how this is playing out and if we see any give on any of these spending and taxing issues that we've been talking about already.
Absolutely. I'll give you one example. There's our libraries. The governor has proposed to cut our library aid by $4 million. The construction aid for libraries by $10 million. Now, it's about priorities. I believe that we should be focusing on infrastructure, making sure we have our libraries, and protecting education. That's the investment in our future. That's the priorities for Western New York, and I want to continue to do that. We'll talk about that in the next show, Mike.
Sounds like a plan. We'll know that much more as we get that much more into the budget debate here at the state capitol. In the meantime, I've been reading, there's been so much discussion the past several years about the SAFE Act in New York State and what that means to the gun owners of the Empire State. I've been reading that there is a recertification deadline that's been coming up for pistol permit holders. But I'm not sure that I understand fully what this deadline is all about and how important it is that people know about it and get ready to meet it.
Yes, Mike, and we've talked on the show before. I'm staunchly opposed to the SAFE Act. I'm a sponsor of the bill that would repeal the SAFE Act everywhere but in New York City. If they would like it in New York City, they can have it, but all the other counties upstate shouldn't have to be subjected to that, and I'm a co-sponsor of that bill to repeal. However, the law is the law, and as an attorney, I have to just say that it's there, and we have been looking at this, Senator Ort and myself, Assemblyman Mike from Niagara Falls as well. The law says that you must recertify your pistol permit by January 31st of 2018. That was in the SAFE Act. That was passed in the middle of the night, but that is the current law. So what we encourage everyone to do, despite that we disagree with it, it is the law. You need to recertify your pistol permit before January 31st. And if you're hearing this after this date, do it immediately. And you can do that by going on the New York State Police website, and they have a link right there to do it. You can also consult with the county clerk's office. I know county clerk in Erie County, Mickey Kearns, and Niagara County County Clerk Georgia Skrimsky has been very, very active and having their offices available to answer questions regarding this. But it's very, very important that you do recertify your pistol permit, and I encourage everyone to do that. Despite that, I don't agree with the law. It is the law, and you must do that.
Yeah, I would suspect that you'd want to make sure, if you're a pistol owner in New York State, that you don't let your displeasure of the law suspend your right to have that pistol.
That's right. And when we spoke at the press conference with Senator Ord and Judge Morinello and a few other elected officials, we emphasized the importance to recertify. Many people didn't know about that, and that's why I've called upon the governor to do anything within his power to extend the deadline. I have gotten on some of the assembly bills that call for the repeal of the recertification process or the extension thereof. But as we're getting to that deadline, I'm not seeing much action on that, but we're fighting for it. But the bottom line is, if you're at home, please recertify your pistol permit so you won't be subject to any penalties. Though the state police and the sheriff have said publicly that they don't intend to enforce the law at this point in time, it's still there. Do yourselves a favor, make sure you recertify.
So the people that are watching should call their county clerk's office.
They can either call the county clerk's office or go directly to the New York State Police website, and there's a recertification process right there, and you fill out the information, you submit it, and you should be good to go. All
right, that's good information. Now, a lot of times we talk at the beginning of a year about the ceremonial startup of any legislative year with the State of the State address, as we noted before from the governor, and the startup of the legislative session and all that. The same is true all around New York State in different communities too. I'm thinking in terms especially of volunteer fire companies and their installation dinners, and it's a new calendar year. It's a fresh start for a lot of groups and organizations.
Yes, and I've had the privilege to attend several installation dinners, other volunteer fire companies this year already, and there's many more to go. It just provides me a great opportunity to go out and to thank the volunteer firefighters in our community for the service and recognize them for the leadership that they take on, if they're an officer or just being a firefighter on a regular service. You know, most taxpayers may not know that the volunteer fire service saves us $3 billion a year in taxes, and the service that they provide is tremendous. You know, Lake Ontario flooding was a very big concern last year. We're still looking at it this year, hoping that we're not going to have a problem. But they are ready to serve. They will do the sandbags. They will be there to pump out the basements, and they did that last year. On top of being at the ambulance, at the accident scene, being at the fire, all volunteer. And I just am so privileged to be at their ceremonies, to see them inducted. And I've also been able to spread some good news. You know, results are important. You know, folks send me to Albany and they expect me to do my job. And I take that very, very seriously. And I can tell you there were 2 pieces of legislation last year that we passed in a bipartisan manner here, and the governor signed into law. The first one was the cancer bill, which would now, under the volunteer firefighter benefit law, amend that. So if you were to unfortunately get cancer as a result of your direct service to the volunteer fire service, you would now be covered under the volunteer firefighters benefit law. And the second thing is the Charities Gaming Act of 2017. That was also signed by the governor. I co-sponsored along with Assemblyman Robin Schimminger from Kenmore in a bipartisan manner. And that will now allow volunteer fire service, American Legions, Rotaries, and Kiwanis to be able to sell their raffles online and also accept debit and credit cards. And these organizations are just putting the money back into the community, putting it back into the good. This amendment will actually enhance the ability for those organizations to better serve and raise money for those in need.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I think people miss out on as they think about their local volunteer fire companies, despite the wonderful work they do, is the commitment. It's not like you can just, I think I'll go and answer a fire call this weekend. The hours and hours of training and certification, it is quite a time commitment. It is quite an overall commitment of the individual to service. I mean, it is a huge public service.
It's a huge service, and they have drill night once a week typically. They have training on the weekends. And also the families. Let's thank the families of the volunteer firefighter service. They might be sitting there at night, starting dinner, having dinner. The call comes and they go, and they're there for us. And I'm so proud to be there and to interact with the volunteer fire service. And I represent 26 volunteer fire companies in my district, and it has truly been a privilege to work with them.
And the exposure, besides to the dangerous fire, but you mentioned getting cancer, the exposure to the toxic chemicals and all that can come into play in any of these situations that the firemen respond to.
Yeah, I mean, they still certainly have a danger there, and but they answer the call. They're there, and I'm looking forward to even working with FASNY and other groups in certain situations to examine the training with volunteer firefighters, and also to examine ambulance service and other pieces of legislation in this coming session, because it's important that we do our part to help our volunteers.
If you happen to be a member of a volunteer fire company or a family member, feel free to reach out to your representative, Mike Norris. He wants to hear from you. And in fact, let me let any of you folks watching know how you can reach out to your representative. It is an easy thing for you to do. You can contact Assemblyman Mike Norris at his office in Williamsville. You can dial 839-4690. That's in the 716-839-4690, or drop an email at norrism@nyassembly.gov. Assemblyman Mike Norris, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, folks, too. We'll hope to see you soon for our next Assembly Calendar.